break before the connector does. Nope, the connector finally did break. So hey, how's it going out there tonight? We're gonna do something a little bit different. I've got to make some connections on my boat, and I've been seeing these for quite a while, and they're a solder connector. Kind of like a center splice, but with solder in the middle. And as you guys know, I really like solder. We're gonna go ahead and try these and make a splice. And we're also gonna make a splice with a regular center splice. And we're gonna go ahead and tension them and see which one's stronger. So stay tuned, it ought to be pretty good. All right, so you may be wondering, there are other kinds of splices. There's wire nuts. And wire nuts make a pretty good electrical connection, and you can tape them up, but they still end up coming loose sometimes. So I'm not a fan of a wire nut in any kind of automotive or marine application. For stranded wire, they're not very good. For solid wire in your house, they're wonderful, they're great. But not really for a boat or a car, I don't like them. These insulated caps, I really like these. Now, when you use those, you got this kind of crimping tool, and if you look at that, on the top, it's got an insulated crimper, and on the bottom, it's got a dimple, and that's for non-insulated. That means no insulation, because you don't want to pierce it with that. A lot of people use that, but you really shouldn't, and tonight, I won't be using that. I'll be using the insulated. And then, of course, being an electrician, I have the calibrated stake-on pliers. And those are really good. Probably just go ahead and use the ones that y'all have got, like this. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, and if you're wondering, it is really hot in the shop, so I'm probably sweating a little bit. So what I got some number 16 gauge wire, and we're gonna go ahead and start out, and we'll cut a piece off. And when you're gonna make a splice with the center splice, you don't want to take too much insulation off. Maybe about 3/8 of an inch. Now, if I were doing this on my boat, I would go ahead and put the heat shrink on before I made the splice. It's important you get it pushed all the way in, and you don't want any copper showing out of the insulated part. Okay, so we got a good solid connection there. Go ahead and get a piece of heat shrink. And let's see, it just gives me diameters on there. And this is marine heat shrink, by the way. So I grabbed a piece of the 3/16. We'll slide it over. I don't need all that, so we'll cut a little bit of it off. About centered there. Now, the difference between a marine heat shrink and regular heat shrink is it's got a glue on the inside of it, a sealant, so it works a little better. We'll go down the wire here a little ways. And cut it. These connectors, the red ring there is an adhesive, so you don't need to put a piece of heat shrink over these when you're done. It's one and done with these. And you can use a little propane torch as well. So my first attempt was with the red solder seal wire connector, which is good from 22 gauge to 16 gauge, but the problem I had was I couldn't strip the wire back, twist it together, and get the connector over it. So I ended up just making a shorter splice like you would with a regular center splice. And guys, that was an epic fail. So as you can see here in just a little bit, I go ahead and I went to the blue connector, which is also good. It starts at number 16 gauge and goes to 14. So as I mentioned a little later, try to go with the bigger connector if you can. This scale is about a pound off. So if you see me using the black scale, and that did not take long. So this joint is really soft after you get done heating it, so you've got to let it set. You got to let that solder set back up. So we're going to have to wait a few minutes before we do a pull test on it, but you'll be able to see the solder as it melts. And you got to get it fairly hot, that's for sure. And you know, I thought when I bought these, you know, they have a low melting solder in them. So you can just use a heat gun without burning the heat shrink and the adhesive up too bad. And I thought, man, I don't know if I want that. But when I thought about it, if an electrical connection gets that hot, it means something is wrong, that connection is failing, and the fuse is not doing its job, because it takes quite a few amps to heat something up to that temperature. So I feel pretty confident that these are going to be all right. If it ends up burning up that connection, something pretty bad went wrong. And to be honest with you, a solder connection electrically is going to have the least resistance. So I feel pretty comfortable with those. All right, this time we're going to switch it up a little bit. The blue connectors are also good for number 16 gauge wires. So we're going to use a blue connector. And if you notice, I stripped that back about a ½ inch and I twisted the wires together. Now, I don't feel like you should really have to do that, but that is going to make for a better connection. So let's heat that up and see what happens. See there, I'm getting a much better melt now. Well, since I didn't get to finish my story last time, this black scale is about a pound off. So if you ever see me out there telling you I caught a 5-pounder and I'm weighing it on that black scale, probably fibbing to you. The fishermen do lie once in a while. Anyway, let's see what we got here. Now on this one, I used the blue connector, and we'll go over that a little bit here in a minute. Hey, look at that. All right, well, since the scale turned off on us last time, let's try it again with the scale on. So it does matter how you install these, for sure. You've got to let that wire go past itself through the center. And it really looks like the wire is going to break before the connector does. Nope, the connector finally did break. And I'll have to go back and look at the footage and see what, but that's pretty impressive. All right, so as you can see, that wire actually pretty much stretched and broke. It's straight, and I did have it twisted around the other wire inside here. And you can see on this one where the solder is actually melted. So that was a much better connection. All right, so all in all, am I going to recommend these solder seal wire connectors? Probably not. As you can see, I struggled with getting a good connection, but I do believe that they would be a really good connector. And I'll go ahead and use these because I feel like the solder is going to give me a good connection, but my go-to is still going to be rosin core solder, wire twisted together with the marine heat shrink over the top of it. That's going to be my go-to. But I'll probably give these a try from time to time. Like I say, you know, I'm pretty good with heat guns, been working with heat shrink my whole life. And that was the third connection I made, and it did make a good connection. The other thing is make sure the reason that I didn't twist the wires together on the red connector was because it wasn't large enough. I couldn't make it work. I tried 3 times. I cut the wire off and redid it. So always go with the bigger size connector if it fits in that range. And I am curious to go back and look at that footage and saw where the break point was, because it totally straightened that wire out. And I could see, you probably couldn't see, but that wire, I'll have to throw it away because it stretched that wire out pretty good. It's not usable anymore. So anyway, if you do want to try them, just make sure, because you can see it, make sure you see that solder has melted pretty good in there. You can still see the band, but you can also see the silver around the edges. And I'll dissect this a little bit more and see, but I can tell by bending it that solder goes from the blue ring to the blue ring. Anyway, I hope this video's helped you. I hope you enjoyed it, and keep calm and hook 'em, guys.